It's my pleasure. It's my pleasure tonight to introduce Michael Lucas. He was here before about a year and a half ago, maybe? Less than that. Yeah, okay, good. So 13 months ago. Tonight he's going to be talking about Sudo, is that right?
Sudo.
Great. I just, the title of the talk was, "You're Doing It Wrong." I'd love to be told I'm doing it wrong, so I can do it. So I'm going to turn it over to Michael, and as soon as he gets plugged in, he's going to give us an awesome talk. And after that, we will have Craig Maloney talking about milestones. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. So, out of curiosity on this video, do you edit out the boring bits of me plugging in my laptop? No.
Nope.
Excellent.
Look at that.
Okay. Hi, folks. My name's Michael Lucas. Pink isn't well. He stayed back at the hotel. Oh, sorry, wrong event. Network engineer, systems administrator, and among other things, I've spent about 20 years arguing with Sudo, as have most of us. So, I write books. I'm pretty well known in the BSD community. My books have a certain amount of attitude with them. There are some of my recent books, so I do have to ask, just for my own reference, did anyone here actually show up because of my blog post that I would be here, or Twitter, or anything like that? We have one, two. Okay, wow. Congratulations, you're the first. Although I think you show up pretty regularly. Second question, did anyone show up in the hope that I would once again throw Brian around the stage?
Not him.
Okay. I'm going to have to disappoint you. You may as well leave now. So, tonight, Sudo. Here are some of the things we'll be talking about. I'm going to go fairly quickly through it. My goal is not to fill your brain with every possible configuration, but to give you an overview of what is possible so that you know it exists. Because once you know the feature is there, you can figure out how it works. So, what is Sudo? It is a program that allows users to run specific commands as different users. The nice thing about Sudo is it's cross-platform and it works within the traditional Unix privilege model. There are other schemes out there for this sort of separation of privilege. Access control lists, SE Linux, pfexec, roles. All of these tools are fine. And we could sit down and have a nice discussion about which are better in which environment. The problem with all of them, though, is that they are platform specific. SE Linux, sure, it works if you're running Linux. The last big car company I worked at had 30-some different variants and versions of Unix. And I really wanted one security tool. Because the more security tools I have to learn, the less well I know each of them. So, the first thing you should know about using Sudo is, if possible, don't. Unix has some privilege models that you can use to good effect. I'm always surprised by how many people never look at the middle 3 bytes in the permission string. We all look at the world permissions, we all look at the user permissions, But there's this group in the middle, and you can create groups that handle a lot of privilege for you. Configuring your DNS services, configuring your web services. All of that can be done with groups, and I would encourage you to do that. And in that case, you only have to use sudo for service management. That simplifies your configuration a lot. Here we have a default sudo policy. I'm going to bet many of you have seen something much like this. Maybe yours says admin or ADM instead of wheel. Sudoers. Everyone makes their own slightly different version. And this boils down to, if you're in this group, you may do anything with sudo. If you are running Unix on your laptop, this is just dandy. It's your machine. If you use sudo and remove all the files on your disk, that's your own problem, and you know who did it. One thing I would mention with this is a lot of Linuxes now, Ubuntu comes to mind, don't ship with a root password set. They expect you to use sudo for everything. And that's fine, so long as you don't break sudo. Once you break sudo, you have to boot into single user mode and fix sudo or set a root password. I would tell you to set a root password so you have a way to fix your system. That your root password is your backdoor. So, why would you want to subdivide privilege? The first 2 points, responsibility and blame, are really the same thing. Who did something? Who's supposed to do something? If you have a complicated system, such as electronic medical records, or an ERP system at a manufacturer, you have a lot of people who administer the system. And they all have their own little piece that they're supposed to take care of. You know, Jim is supposed to do the printers, and Brian is supposed to do the database. And you all need root privilege for some part of this. Sudo lets you break that up, so that if someone breaks the printers, well, in theory, you know it wasn't Brian. This limits the pool of who can break the system. This sudo will also let you remove the need for a password from certain administrative tasks. This depends on your organization, but we've all hit these circumstances. And finally, my favorite point is making the boss do his job. If you've subdivided privilege, your boss cannot come in and say, I know you're not the DBA, but could you just log in and check this one quick thing for me? We've all had this happen. And whenever it happens to me, I have this sinking feeling in my gut as I say, oh, there's no way this is possibly going to come back and bite me in the ass. This is going to be just dandy. So, sudo rule format, username, host, command. We all see the username. Most of the time, the host name is set to all, because most of us don't use sudo very well. And then commands, well, in the default rule set, it's always all. But here, we have a machine where the user MW Lucas on the host DNS1 can do anything. But then you can combine things. We have two users on two hosts, And we can both run two very specific commands. So maybe we can edit the DNS configuration using group privileges. But then we can slap the syslog server and the named server when they need it. And by using these groups, this lets us if I had to write each of these out individually, this would be 6 lines of policy. And I like short policies. So here, everybody in this group, except me, can do anything. Obviously, I annoyed the system owner. It happens a lot. So, that same negation you can use on commands. But can anybody tell me what's wrong with this? We have my user on any machine. I can run any command except binsh. You see this in sudo tutorials all over. Why is it broken?
Could you run bash or another shell?
Because you could run bash or another shell, yes. Now, let's take this a little further. Suppose I put binsh, bin bash. I listed every shell. Why is this broken?
Well, now programs you are allowed to use can't spawn subshells.
Many programs can spawn subshells, yes. But you're thinking the hard way. I copy binsh to another file name, and I run that file. And guess what? I have root. Do not negate commands. Ever. Ever. No, not even then. Just, no. No.
Isn't CP a shell command?
I'm sorry?
Isn't CP a shell command?
It's an internal, I think.
No,
Okay.
no, it is in bin. I would not be shocked to discover that bash has CP as an internal. But if it is, please don't tell me. I get depressed enough about bash as it is.
It's in bin.
It's in bin, yes. So, running command is another user. A lot of organizations I'm in, you have a database team. And they, depending on your database software, they frequently have to run commands as that user. And that user has their environment all set up. I'm looking at Oracle in particular. But here we have a user who can run any command at all as Oracle. So the database administrator can break the database, but he doesn't need Oracle's password, and he doesn't need to log in as Oracle. He can just use Oracle's environment to run a command. So, a sudo policy is a bunch of sudo rules together. You can write horribly complex sudo policies. For those of you who are going out to Altair this weekend, I suggest you ask Jeff Marasini about his 500-line sudo policy. But if you run a firewall, a sudo policy will look very similar. Rules are processed in order. The last matching rule wins. And your policy must end in a blank line. That third requirement is what trips people up. You edit your sudoers policy with the program visudo. etc sudoers is the typical place for your sudoers policy. What visudo does is it copies the policy file to a temporary file, lets you edit that temporary file. It parses the file to make sure it is syntactically valid. And there is a difference between syntactically valid and does anything useful, but it's at least syntactically valid. And if it is valid, it copies it into place when you exit the editor. Visudo, as you might guess from its name, uses VI. I hope everybody in this room sets cache editor to use Vim or Emacs or whatever it is you want. So, once you have a sudoers policy, if you log onto a system and you're a user, sudo -l tells you what you may do. So you don't have to stumble around going, can I do this, can I do that? If you're the sysadmin and you've just given someone new sudo privileges, sudo -U username -l lets you see what sudo thinks their privileges are. This is a very useful thing to run before you call the user back and tell them that they're all set. A sudoers rule set will also let you do pattern matching. These patterns should look familiar to everyone here. Is there anyone who is not familiar? Okay, usual regex stuff. DNS servers 1 through 4, I own. Here I have permission to run any command in user local sbin. Why I would use that, I have no idea, but it's an option. Single characters, you can backslash special characters, and then an important one is 2 double quotes let you disallow arguments. It says you can run this program, but no command line flags.
They have asterisks of pattern matching, correct? So that would mean you could run anything in the subdirectory as well.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, hang on, I did not put that slide in. The asterisk does not match the slash for subdirectories. They specifically don't do that. There is a sudo thing to let you get the subdirectories as well. But with the proliferation of some of these things like, you know, user local, libexec, Apache 22, HTTPD, whatever, they made it one directory deep. So we have lists. You can combine, you can make predefined lists and turn them into aliases. Here we have a command alias called backup. And it includes dump, restore, and mount. Does anybody still use dump? Of course Mike Wayne does. You use this exactly like a list. The nice thing is, if you discover your backup guys need another command, you add it to the alias, and it propagates instantly through the rules. And you can have aliases for hosts and for users. So here we have this user alias, tape monkeys. It includes 2 users. We have a host alias, www. It has 3 web servers. And tape monkeys can, on the web servers, run all of the backup commands.
Why would you use a user alias as opposed to setting up a group with those users?
There may be very good reasons for that. You can distribute one sudoers policy across hundreds of machines on multiple operating systems. And you may not have a choice on how some of those operating systems are configured. If you've ever used like an ERP system where the vendor comes and says, you will use AIX, And it will be configured this way, and your usernames will be 3 characters long. And don't ask them why the usernames will be 3 characters long, because then they'll tell you, and you'll need a good stiff drink. So, alias names must begin with a capital letter, but they can include numbers and underscores. So, a run as list is also like an alias, except it is for running commands as a group of users. If you have a big enterprise environment, and you may have multiple databases, you can list all of these database users and just say, okay, this user on all of the database servers can run any database command, any command as a database user. And the worst that's going to happen with this is that the user will go and try to run Postgres commands on the Oracle machine, and that is not a systems administration problem. Sudoers can also pull users and groups out of LDAP, out of NIS. They can use UIDs and GIDs, of course, and Active Directory. Has anyone linked their Unix authentication into Active Directory? You could do this. Whether you want to or not is your decision. Can also pull hosts out of net groups and subnets and IP addresses. So, a sample, this is a very short sudoers policy. If you're in the wheel group, you can do anything. If you're a database user, if you're in the database group, you can run any command on a database server as a database user. The folks in the take monkeys can reboot the database machines, but they can back up everything and also reboot. And here's actually a problem with this policy, but I'll show you that in just a moment. Sudo also has options. How many of you have been insulted by sudo? Okay. Sudo is supposed to insult you when you cannot type your password. A lot of these newer Linuxes have been trying to get social acceptance, and so they've turned this feature off. This is how you turn insults back on, which is how the software is intended to work. So, by using the keyword defaults and the name of the option, you enable it. Some options take arguments. For example, the password tries option says how many times does the user get to try to enter their password. I have had a specific user that I have needed to set password tries equals 9 for. And some options you can set to 0 to turn them off. For example, password timeout is how long does the cached password remain good for. By setting it to 0, you say no, you have to type the password every time. And some options let you set a string to go with them. The user that needed password tries equals 9 was not amused by their custom password message. And some of these options you can set on a per user basis. Here, the default is for any user in the wheel group. We don't give them the lecture. You know, with great power comes great responsibility. Your systems administrator has given you the power to completely destroy the system. Please don't. I would be happy to never see this message again. I know. And then you can set some options on by command. Wheel does not get the lecture. But if you're running fdisk, you always get the lecture, and you get a special lecture just for the fdisk command. I have set this for a specific user, which has given him a message that says, if you erase the root disk again, we are going to have words. So, you can use a colon for users, an exclamation point to indicate it's for a command, or an arrow for run as. So, if you're running a command as a database administrator, you get insulted because, frankly, DBAs are used to being insulted by their software, and not insulting them just kind of confuses them. So, I gave some brief rules on sudo policies before. Here I have some conflicting defaults and rules. First line, insult MW Lucas. That's fine, it's what I expect. For the command, user bin su, do not insult. And then I have a specific rule here, says, give my user privilege to run su. Never mind that you don't need sudo to run su, which makes this a really stupid example. But my question for you, if I run su with sudo, do I get insulted? A lot of people saying no. Is anybody saying yes? And we have one hand.
No, I had a question. You said that you didn't need sudo to run su. I use sudo to run su all the time in order to become root.
If you do su,
Sudo space su space dash.
and what you're doing is saying, run this command as the root user. I can do su root and enter the root password.
Right. With
I do
sudo,
sudo
I put in my password.
And you're saying run su as root. If you run su as root, you become root.
Mhm.
If you run su, try running su as yourself, and don't give it an argument.
But then I got to put in root's password instead of my own.
I'm sorry, try putting in like su your own account. Su all by itself is a little special.
Right.
But you can run su and give it root's password, and you become root.
Correct.
You can also run like su space Oracle
And become more.
Oracle. So you don't need sudo to run su. You just need the password to whatever you're switching to.
Right. With sudo, you don't.
Sudo, you need your own password. It's all a question of how your privilege model is set up. So, these conflicting defaults, last matching rule wins. Okay, someone mentioned before shell escapes. I need root privileges to view some system logs. There are lots of reasons I might want a help desk guy to be able to view the authentication log. So he can answer the question and say, no, you entered the wrong password. But you enter an exclamation point, you can enter a shell command, and boom, you have root. That's where noexec comes in. You can say, yes, you can run this command, but the command may not execute other commands. So, this means you can't run sudo visudo, because visudo runs an editor. So, some things you want to allow escapes, and you'll be really surprised at what forks another process and what doesn't. New aliases runs a subcommand, which makes sense when you think about it for more than 2 seconds, but when you first see it, you kind of go, wait, what? What I've done here, I've said globally, commands may not execute commands. I have this command alias of things that may execute commands. And then I've specifically said, okay, I could run all commands, but these commands may run other commands. So, commands I run may not execute commands, except for the ones that may. So, editing files is a similar headache. Text editors have shell escapes, because we all want to run ifconfig while editing our diary. Who wouldn't? So, if I own rc.conf is a BSD thing, it's the main system config. There are lots of reasons why someone might want to edit this file. And I could give them permission to by saying here's a text editor, or here's an argument, you can edit just this file, but this is kind of a pain. Now, if you're a sysadmin, you need to know VI. And it's the one editor that is everywhere. I've updated. I used to say that you need to know ed, but this is the 21st century, you can upgrade to VI. But I don't want to compel my people to always use VI. Mainly because I don't want to listen to them whine. The editor here, if I set this properly, VI can't do a shell escape to do other things, but the user might legitimately want a shell escape. Because there are times you're editing a file and want to say, wait, what was that again? I mean, you check it, you grab the text, you feed it in, fine. That's where sudo edit comes in. Sudo edit is a sudo setting that says you may edit this file. And what it does is it copies the file, opens the file with your preferred editor, lets you edit the file, you can use your shell escapes and everything, and you're running as your unprivileged user. And when you're done, it copies a temporary file over the original. So,
yeah, well, what's to prevent you from setting the editor to be like in SH?
do you have permission to run binsh?
Maybe not.
Right, yeah.
Well, but
Remember, your editor is running as you. If you want to run binsh this file as you, that's okay.
But if you, sudo edit is going to run whatever editor is in your dollar editor.
Yeah.
Right? But it has to run as root if you want to edit rc config.
No,
How can the editor run as?
it takes rc.conf,
Okay.
copies
Copy
it to like, temp garbage.
Gotcha. So it runs the copy as root, so, or
Well, it doesn't even have to run the copy as
the
root.
permissions on rc.conf.
Depending on the permissions, yes.
But then it runs the editor as a.
As runs the editor as you, the run the copy to put the temporary over the permanent, yes.
Copy it back. You have to get that.
And sudo edit has things to detect race conditions, so you don't have multiple people trying to edit rc.conf simultaneously, not that this ever happens. Okay, environment variables. Sudo strips environment variables. Looking around the room, I'm going to guess most of you know, most of you have experienced environment variables that cause trouble. So Sudo strips out all of those. There's none of this LD library config automatically being copied in and loading your developmental copy of LD.so and taking the whole system down. Not that I've ever done that. But it will let you specifically list environment variables to keep. Sometimes I have systems where I become root, but I want to copy files to another machine. I need access to my SSH agent and all the various SSH settings to be able to do that. Because of course, I don't allow SSH with passwords, and I'm sure none of you allow SSH with passwords, because you're all good, decent people. And none of you would do something so heinous. So, some things to think about when if you have 30-odd different Unixes, and you want a security policy across all of them, the all command means unrestricted root access. That's it. You're giving them full root on the system. There is nothing wrong with doing this so long as you know that you are doing it. If you don't want to give them unrestricted access, enumerate allowed commands and enumerate allowed environment variables. Security policy with sudo is just like a firewall. Do you have default allow or default deny? There are some other features in sudo that, since my last talk went about 50% over time, I figured we would discuss these if we have time tonight rather than just including the slides. Sudo can act as a tripwire style intrusion detection system. You can run sudo su and have sudo compare the checksum on the su command to its known copy of the checksum. And if that checksum doesn't match, it kicks you out. It says no, and it logs an error. You can send sudo across your entire network, either by a file or in LDAP. If you're using Active Directory, you can grab the sudo AD LDAP schema, put it in AD, and have your machines use your central authentication, which if you're already authenticating Unix against Active Directory, loss of Active Directory pretty much hoses your network already. Although you can do fallbacks, so that you can do some things even when Active Directory is down. Sudo can log and debug everything that you type in a session. If, say, Jim, you come into work and you find that, oh, all of your servers are sitting at a single user prompt and /user has gone missing, you can look in the log files and see who ran commands under sudo last night and play back in real time or accelerated or slowed speed exactly what each sudo session had typed in it. And then you can pick up the phone and say, Brian, come in my office.
On Friday, pick up your check.
Authentication. Sudo uses PAM on systems that support it. So, if you have a preferred sudo library, sorry, a preferred PAM library that you like to use, say Google Authenticator, or one of my favorites is SSH agent authentication. You can tell sudo to use this. So for example, at my last job, we eliminated password authentication completely from the environment. The machines had a root password, but the machines were configured so that you could only use the root password from the console. To log into a machine, you had to use SSH with an SSH agent. The user password files were, sorry, the user key files were not in the user account. Users could not update their own SSH files. They were kept under root control. We used Ansible to push them out to all machines simultaneously. So when a user got a new machine and created a new key, we could, or got rid of an old machine, we could update everything in about 2 minutes. When they wanted root privilege, they ran sudo. It ran without a password, but it came back and hit their SSH agent. So this was, and I see a couple of heads shaking in the background, but there are places where this makes sense, and there are environments where you would not want to do it. But the point is, it's a tool. You have a whole bunch of other tools. Plug them together. Make something that fits your environment. Okay, how are we doing on time?
It's probably like 25 minutes or so.
Wow. Okay, I'm gonna take questions until we run out of questions. However, I do want to make this trip tax deductible. So, I write books. Here are some of them. You might find some of them useful. Please buy them. Thank you.
Yeah, go back to that slide.
Okay,
Word
newest
sponsor.
books. The FreeBSD book in the corner on the FreeBSD storage subsystem. An SF novel that is a play off of movies like Carpenter's The Thing, but set after we lose. If you, for the people who are on YouTube watching this, because I know that nobody in this room does this, the SSH book lets you get rid of passwords in your environment. You need to do that. So, any questions?
Yeah, can you clarify what you mean by SSH with and without passwords? I guess I'm really lost on
Okay. SSH has a couple different ways to authenticate. One of them is it's a drop-in telnet replacement. You connect to a machine, it asks you for a username, and it asks you for a password. There are bots scanning the whole internet right now. Go do a search on something called the Hail Mary Cloud. Peter Hanstein has some excellent articles on this. That they are literally scanning the internet and trying to brute force passwords on SSH servers. Once they get in, they add your host to the botnet and continue scanning other hosts. Now, this is very slow, but if you have a server on the open internet, they have lots of time. Now, tools like fail to ban that lock someone out after a certain amount of time, or a certain number of failed attempts, they block the IP address, those are fine. But the problem is these password scanners are distributed. You get one attempt from this host, you get another attempt from the next IP, and from the next IP, it's distributed, it's coordinated, and once they're in your system, they'll use it for whatever they want. So, I would strongly, I would, the biggest security improvement you can make to any network is to eliminate password-based authentication, especially in SSH. Does that help?
Yeah, although, I guess the only thing I'm a little, I get that idea, how do you do that? I mean, what do you replace?
You replace it with public key authentication, where the server will only let you log in if you have a private key. The private key is kept on your desktop system, and there you encrypt it with a passphrase. So there is something you know involved in the authentication, but it's only on your local machine and it's not accessible over the network.
I think the thing to make clear is you sit down at your desktop, you log in, you have a password there that you log in with, or a token or something. that you log
Yes.
in. It's accessing the servers out in your server farm, or in your back room, or in your data center,
Yes.
or whatever, that you're doing SSH to
Yes,
with public-private key pairs,
correct.
which I think would make an excellent talk.
If it would make an excellent talk, I would be happy to come back and get it. Give it.
You just volunteered. Okay.
Write that down.
Brute force attack across the password is not good.
No.
The PKE system, it says, okay, you got the attacker says, okay, try A, give me the string, I'll try that. Try AA, give me the string, which is essentially a brute force attack with one step more.
Yes. Well, a brute force attack of private key generation is much, much harder than guessing an 8-character password.
No. What I'm saying is all I have to do is guess the encoding string. Because when I go over to my Cisco server and give it that string, I go over to the other server and give it, other router and give it that string, the big bytes match. So all I have to do is guess the root.
No, that's, are you thinking of like Radius or TACAX?
PKE encryption on the routers.
Oh, no, that's used differently. Yeah, I think you're, PKE.
Or PKM or whatever.
Or
that is.
PKI. Usually that's for something like a VPN, not for user authentication. Generally speaking, the SSH key is 1024 bits. So it's a little harder than just guessing the right string.
I'm not talking about guessing the string. I'm talking about guessing what string the guy came up with where the computer generated the whole thing.
But that's
If-
only on the desktop.
That you can only access on the desktop.
That's for unlocking the private key to be used to.
That's unlocking the
Yes.
lockbox.
Yeah.
And yes, when you encrypt your private key for SSH access, it is a really good idea to not use easily guessed phrases. For example, "He's dead, Jim" is a lousy passphrase. You also should not use phrases that people will guess from being associated with you. I cannot use the passphrase, "Tell me again why I should care about this." Because everybody I know is right there. The same with, "Well, I guess it sucks to be you." No, everybody will guess it. So, yes, you have to take care with your passphrase, but it's a lot harder to pull a private key off of someone else's desktop and brute force the passphrase on that than it is to guess username and password on a publicly connected server. Also- Yes, there's a great XKCD on this. And for the record, I have seen the XKCD sudo comic. You can stop sending it to me now. Thank you.
No, the reason I bring this up is Unix at one time says, well, we're not going to have the password on the machine. We're going to have the encoded version on the machine.
Yes.
And everybody said, yay, yippee, yippee, yay, yay. And then the guy says, hey, who cares? I'll just keep pumping the things in and match the encoded password.
Oh, yes, yes. Well, once you have turned off, once you stop using password authentication, you can turn off the ability to authenticate with passwords. You're saying, no, the password no longer counts. We don't use it for anything. Mr. Wayne.
Michael and I have had this discussion before. It's a philosophical one. There is an issue to be aware of if you go this route. And that is that if somebody does get in and gets physical access, or if people are using servers and they get remote access, and you don't use passwords, you pretty much opened all the other machines with that username are now open to them.
Assuming that they don't have passphrases on there or aren't using agents.
Yes, if
Assuming they don't use passwords.
Yeah.
you should never copy your private key to a server. If you are at the console, well, your account needs a password. That doesn't mean you actually have to use it. If you sit down at the console and you want to log into the machine, you should be able to enter a password and get your account. If someone logs into one machine, they can't SSH to another box if that box requires a public key for authentication, because they don't have it.
That's what the agent is for.
That is exactly what your SSH agent is for.
So, I had this job one time where we each had our own account on our box, and the user accounts were distributed on all the boxes, so you can log in on anybody's box for yourself. And my coworker came to me and said, hey, I have a problem, I need help debugging something for my account. And so I said, okay, great, I'll sudo su your username, become like you, and debug your problem. Well, it wouldn't let me. It said I didn't have access to do that. And then he said, no problem, just run sudo su my username, and I got in. So I was curious, what kind of a sudo configuration would let somebody do that?
A daft one. If you say, if your rules for sudo say you may do anything, you may do anything. What happened there is someone put in their sudoers policy, a role set somewhat like the example where I forbade the use of a shell. They forbade use of SU. But they didn't forbid the use of sudo under sudo. So, when you start carving out narrow exceptions of what commands you may use, what you are saying is, I am more clever than all of these Unix guys that I work with and that I'm responsible for. I'm smarter than every one of them. Either you are wrong, or you need another job because you're not going to learn anything here. Personally, I don't want to work at a place where I'm the smart guy. I want to work at some place where I'm the idiot and I can soak in everything from all these brilliant minds around me. Don't use exclusions in your sudo policy. Although I will say, that's a really clever workaround that I was previously unaware of. Thank you.
So by exclusions, you mean they started out with all, but then they said except?
Yes. If your command list starts off with all and then comma, bang su, bang sh, bang bash, bang tcsh, the first thing I'm going to do is go look to see if you have zsh installed. Yes, yes, pick your shell. Any other sudo questions? Any other? Yes, sir.
I work for a school district. Our users are about as security conscious as most. We're trying to adopt Linux on our older machines.
Okay.
And it ain't about training. They're
No.
never gonna be trained and they're never gonna be security conscious.
Correct.
So, we're just kind of like, I don't know, how do we do this so that we're not, so that they're safe, but, you know, they can actually.
Okay.
Lay the bomb back.
You work for a school district. You want to keep the kids safe.
No,
Sorry.
I'm talking about the teachers. The kids are not the problem. The teachers are.
You want to keep the teachers safe.
Yeah.
I've always kind of felt that, you know, public school teachers are pretty much doomed. But, I would say your education point is spot on. We have been working with networked computers now for 30 years. If user education was going to work, it would have worked by now. So that's a dead avenue. What are you specifically afraid is going to happen to a teacher? I mean, is one of the students gonna pull out F-disk and wipe them? Or what's your concern here?
Well, the kind of things that we'd be concerned about, because, yeah, I mean, if that kind of thing happens, okay, we really just do whatever, that's not that big a deal. But, there is sometimes confidential student information involved in things that people, and yet, you know, I go into classrooms and I see teachers that they're still logged on. I mean, and it could easily be, you know, so we want them to be secure, but realistically, security's gotta be easy for
Oh, yes.
they will defeat us.
Okay. So you have teachers leaving their workstations logged on while they walk away.
Yeah, one.
This is a classic problem. To steer back on the topic of the discussion supposedly, sudo is not going to help you. This is where I have in the past used extreme user education. You wait until the company, well, hypothetically speaking, if the company vice president kept doing this, I would wait till he went to lunch, walk into his office, and send an email to all staff saying he was giving up golf and he's letting his golf clubs go free to the first person to walk by and take them. Something like this can be highly effective.
I'll get you fired.
Turn users' screens upside down.
Can we use sudo?
Yeah, turn the screen.
Maybe this is a hypothetical, but I was just thinking about this, okay, talking about exclusions and things like that, but, only the things that are safe work well.
Well,
I'm not quite sure how to do it, but.
your best friend here is probably terminal timeouts. Say, screen locks after 60 seconds of inactivity.
Of course, then, you know, there's the fact that their password is written on the monitor.
The password written on the monitor, you are not going to overcome that. That's again an extreme user education.
Yeah, I realize I'm kind of going beyond sudo, but it seems to me that it's a huge issue that I read in a security blog someplace the phrase properly paranoid user, and I get that, but our users aren't, and they never.
Your users never will be. You can increase their paranoia. And the best way I have found to increase your users' paranoia is through a program of what I call gleeful, well-meaning malice. You convince them that doing things correctly will be less pain than having you hurt them. And that takes buy-in from the people in charge. So,
Very short timeouts on their inactivity timer, at least till they prove that they understand what's going on.
yes,
Give them 60 seconds, right?
60 seconds
If they're idle for more than 60 or 120 seconds,
Can I-
they get the screensaver lock.
Can I implement insults piped to text to speech? Because one thing that might work is, you're in a classroom, let's embarrass them in front of the students.
Hey, dummy, log off. Don't do that.
I think that the idea of piping insults into text-to-speech is brilliant, and I encourage someone. I know this talk is going on YouTube, and you still put these on YouTube, don't you?
Yep.
Yeah, I encourage one of you working on this to implement this as a sudo module.
Two things. One, text-to-speech with the kids in the room insulting the teacher is not going to win you any friends from anybody, because the kids will just get a little more loose. Two, why can't you have a timeout? You've got it on the screen right now. The teachers are doing a display. Every 60 seconds, she's got to run back and do it.
It's very easy to keep a wireless mouse in your hand and walk around. I've done that before.
That's going to be once to buy 30
And
of them.
as far as insulting the teachers goes, no, teachers really don't need any more grief. But you can write your own custom insult files. And custom insults, again, can be very useful. I've used them to very politely say, please don't break this again. Thank you.
With 13 kids looking at you and trying to figure out whether you're important or not. And that comes over the speaker.
Yes, yes, and again, public school teachers, I'm sorry, you folks do a thankless job and you're doomed. The least we should do is pay you more. Any other questions on, there was LDAP, logging?
I've got the book there.
Yes, sir.
What's your opinion of user-generated or databases such as the KeyPass?
A password database like KeyPass. I believe that's something that it runs on your phone and you store your passwords in it, or it keeps your passwords for
Well,
you.
I don't keep it
feeds
on
it,
my phone, but on my
on your laptop or whatever. I think that a program like that is better than the sticky note. Passwords are a real problem. We want different passwords for every website. They need to be proper passwords with a mix of upper and lower case, punctuation, numbers, astrological symbols, and the blood of a virgin. And they all have to be unique, and yet you have to be able to remember them all. Human beings do not work this way. I have a piece of paper. Now that I'm a full-time writer, I have the luxury. I always work from home. I have a piece of paper on my wall, in between the windows, so nobody can peer in with the telephoto lens and snap it. And I have about 50 sites and passwords written on this piece of
So you
paper.
got the giant sticky note.
I have the giant sticky note.
It's not covering the terminal.
Okay.
It's not covering the terminal. And
It's not
it's
hard to find if
horrible.
you walk into it.
It is absolutely horrible. Choose the solution that you can live with if it fails. If you're in a school, you better not have a sticky note. My company staff consists of 3 pet rats. And if they get my password list, I have other problems. Yeah.
Very sticky.
Lunch.
But with us, I mean, you know, I use one called LastPass, which is similar to KeyPass.
Yes.
Except for it's,
And I use one for different purposes called PassPack. And then there's things like Keychain and Apple.
Yep.
One of the things that scares me about these things is if you don't configure them right, and somebody is on your login computer, they own the farm.
Yes.
Because, you know, once they're in your password manager.
Yes, if
you know
someone,
everything.
if someone's in your password manager, you're hosed. If you choose a poor password manager vendor, you are hosed. Some of these have been broken. If you choose one, I would suggest you strongly look at the company's history and their track record before deciding to use it. And poor Mr. Wayne has had his hand up
No,
there
this
for
is,
like
this is.
3 hours.
It goes along with this. This topic came up approximately a year ago on NANOG, North American Network Operators Group, which is all the people who run the network basically across North America and part of the world. And it raged on for, I think, close to 6 weeks, and the result of it all was use LastPass. And I decided that if they were willing to go with that, I was too, so.
Okay.
They're a lot, as Michael said, they're a lot smarter than I am. I'm just gonna use their recommendation. And the nice thing about LastPass is it encrypts it before it leaves your machine. So you still have the physical access. If they get to your machine, they have your passwords. I do something along the line of what he does. I actually keep my passwords in a file on a machine that is in my house, under my control, and unlikely for anybody to get at, and they're also encrypted, so.
And LastPass, and I hate to say this because the free product is pretty good for you. I mean, for an individual. For an organization, I would probably only use LastPass Enterprise, and the reason I say that is you can enforce things like not allowing the path, you know, not allowing it to be kept open. You can enforce time limits, things like that. If you don't have that in an enterprise, you really have a job.
Well, I use LastPass for all the things that, if I got cracked, I really wouldn't mind, and everything else I keep under my control, and that's it. All the things I really care about aren't in a password manager.
For the folks at home, the result of a 6-week flame war on the Nano mailing list was use LastPass for this problem. If you're in an organization, look at LastPass Enterprise. Yes, sir.
Yeah, one thing I will say about LastPass is that now that we're in the age of even encryption can be broken, LastPass first encrypts and then they hash, and they don't keep your password, so that if you lose your LastPass password, it's gone. So even if you call them on the phone and you went to their headquarters or whatever, they couldn't help you. So those two things.
If you
I
break
think-
LastPass, too bad.
But the other
Call your
side
local
is that
NSA.
if Mafia takes over LastPass, for example, takes over LastPass Incorporated, it doesn't do any good.
If the
Yes.
Mafia
As of 6 hours ago, LastPass did not.
with their guns and took over LastPass.
That's right.
Yeah, I saw
And
that.
they kept the people that knew how to run the operation around here and could change everything. They
So, LastPass, I would say in general on the topic of these password keepers, any password system, the weak point in any cryptography scheme is the user. And in fact, since someone asked me to keep the book slide up, I believe I'm now allowed to say that the FreeBSD storage book has a chapter on cryptography systems meant to protect the user in case of, say, terrorist attack. If you're in an embassy and they have a gun to your head and they say decrypt the file system, that book has some software techniques from some of the FreeBSD features that may keep you alive a little longer. Of course, if someone has broken into the embassy and has guns and has shot the Marines, you're already in a lot of trouble. But I'll take the chance.
So what's it do? Generate 30 gigs of data? It doesn't look like a database?
No. What it does is it says the entered passphrase is correct, but the on-disk keys have been destroyed. The human being has cooperated,
So now
which
you're
is
useless.
No, which is translated, he typed in the wrong password.
it depends on who's doing it and what kind of expertise they have, and if you're in that situation, I mean, personally, when I've looked at job offers in the past, I've said, okay, does this job require this kind of disk encryption? It does require that? Okay, I'm going to have to turn you down, thank you very much. I'm going to go over here where I get to keep all my fingers.
And I do it by remote from Washington.
So,
Yeah, I'm set.
So,
Thank you.
that's
Thank you very much.